Hi there guys, this video is going to be on the HW100. What we're going to be doing today is taking it apart. So first of all I'm going to remove the single shot loader. There it comes there. And then just dry fire the gun. Secondly, I'm going to remove the stock. That's done with a 4mm Allen key in this bolt here. This is obviously the form stock, but the KT stock also has a screw in the barrel band, so you'll need to remove that as well. But there it comes. With the stock removed, we can start disassembling. Now first of all, I'm going to take the bottle off. To do that, I need to burp it. So what I'm going to do is just do 2 quarter turns by hand, dry fire it, and as we can see the gauge isn't moving, so I'm going to do another couple little turns there, and as we can see there, gauge is now dropping with each shot, so that means that the bottle's disconnected and we can continue to dry fire until we're running out of air. There's the bottle removed and the rifle's degassed. Now on the standard version you don't need to do that, you can just unscrew the cylinder. Before we go any further, what I'm going to do is take note of the regulator pressure. So to do that, I'm going to flip the gun over and locate this screw in the bottom there. With a 3mm Allen key we can take the cap grub screw off, and then there's ball bearing behind it. Now this one came out really easily, but the ball bearing can get stuck down in the hole there. I've read some people have to take the bottle off, take the regulator out, then push the ball bearing out from this side using an Allen key. However, the last couple I've taken out, I've used a small stack of very thin neodymium magnets. These are 4mm in diameter, and they just fit in the hole nicely, and they'll stick to the ball bearing and allow you to just pull it out. There is a very small O-ring in this hole. Some people say you can take it out without consequence, as the ball bearing seals on the seat inside there, but I always like to keep it in because the fitting that I've got for my regulator tester uses that O-ring to seal. So I'm going to install my reg tester. I think HW100 sells one similar to this. They use an analog gauge, but as I have access to a lathe, I just made up an adapter that allows me to screw straight in there. Right, so I've put the bottle back on, and we can see from the regulator tester now that we're at 102 bar. This means the regulator is set at 102 bar, and I'll just note that down for when we rebuild it. We might not set it as high as 102, but we know if we get any problems in the future we can always go back to this, and I know this rifle shoots well at the moment, so it will go back to 102 bar. Next, to make it a little easier to handle, what I'm going to do is take the shroud off. Now this is an aftermarket one, so you might not have it on your one obviously, but in this case we can just use a 1.5mm Allen key in here to loosen the grub screw, and the shroud slides off. And next we'll take the bottle adapter off. So this is done with an 8mm Allen key. It can be quite tight, so I've just loosened it there. There we have it. Bottle adapter comes off nice and easily. There is a pin here as well which we can take out, and that's just an aligning pin to ensure that the bottle adapter always stays straight. So we'll put that to one side. And while we're at the front here, we'll take out the barrel. That's simply done with a 2.5mm Allen key in this grub screw here. There we have the barrel. It does have an O-ring on it. We'll replace that when we rebuild it. Next we'll take the trigger unit off, and that's very simply done with a 4mm Allen key in this front screw here and the rear one behind the safety. And the trigger unit can be lifted off as one piece. So in the bottom here we have the hammer and the indexing arm for the magazine. We'll take that out shortly. But first we're going to remove the front half of the block. That's done with 4mm Allen key in these 2 screws here. They can be quite tight from the factory, so I've had better luck using a traditional Allen key for this. Once the screws are loose, the block can just be separated, like so. And here we have the front portion of the block, which is self-contained and sealed. So if you need to do any regulator testing, you don't need to rebuild the whole rifle. You can just pressurise this unit and it's self-sealing. Obviously you'll need the back half if you want to fire it, but if you need to leak test it or anything like that, you can pressurise this as one unit without any problems. First thing we're going to do is remove the valve, and that's done with a 4mm Allen key in these two screws here. They are quite tight, so again, nice Allen wrench. I like to put my finger on it and just hold the spring so it doesn't spring out all at once as you're undoing it. And then the valve and the seat can be pulled out as one unit. Stick that to one side. Now this screw here is your regulator adjuster. Screwing it in or clockwise will increase the reg pressure, and screwing it counterclockwise or out will decrease your regulator pressure. So just bear that in mind. If you don't have a regulator tester but just need to change some seals within the regulator, you can take the measurement from the block to the face of the adjuster, and that will give you a rough idea of your pressure. And this is one of the regulators that you can adjust under pressure. But since I've already got the exact reg pressure, I'm just going to take this little screw out. And that's using a 5mm Allen key. Be careful, there can be a Belleville washer stuck to that. Then once that's out, we just take our Allen key and just shake the Belleville washers onto it. This is our stack. It looks just like 4 stacks of 4. 2 cupped that way, 2 cupped the other way. So I'll set that to one side, and we're going to go in from this side and take the regulator housing itself out. So using a 10mm socket. The regulator itself can be quite tight in the hole, so what I've done is I've just put it in the vise. Nice bit of rubber either side of it. I'm just going to crack it loose. So I'll do this off camera, but that's how I'm going to do it, and obviously with a 10mm socket. So you saw me crack it loose at the vise, and I'm just going to continue taking it out over at the bench. There it comes there. That's the front of the regulator. Then we can just push the piston and the piston housing out from this side. There's the piston. And there's the piston housing. Just make sure when you're pushing it out that you go nice and careful. You don't want to scratch anything in here. So when I took it out, I was nice and careful to only touch the edge of this and not scratch the inside of the block. Right, and that's the front block fully disassembled. There is an O-ring in the end here, which we'll pull out now. Here it comes there. And we could, if we wanted to, we could take this thread core out. I don't see a need to, and it just seems like a headache, so I'm going to leave it in there. There we have it, front block fully disassembled. So I'll stick that to one side, we'll get started on the rear block. Right, so this is the rear block, and we're going to start by taking out the hammer spring and the hammer spring shuttle. So first of all, to take out these 2 screws here, and they're 2mm Allen keys. That rear cover plate pulls off, and then as we cock the hammer back, we see the rear of the hammer spring shuttle. Now I'm going to be changing this for an adjustable hammer spring version, and that's available from HW100 Tuning. So we'll get it out in this video, and then we'll put the new one back in the next. First off, what we're going to do is take this screw out here. That's done using a 2mm Allen key. It can be quite tight, so just be careful. And there we have it there. And that's just part of the indexing for the magazine. Right, next, to get the hammer spring and the hammer spring shuttle out, what we need to do is knock out this pin. Now we go in through this side with with a nice thin punch and just knock the pin out from that side. We don't need to remove it fully, but we do need to be able to take out the cocking arm. I've found it's easiest to do this in the vise, so I'll get this clamped up and I'll meet you over by the vise. Okay, so I've got the block nice and clamped up securely in the vise, just with some rubber either side to protect the finish. What we're going to do is take our punch, go in this little hole here and just tap the punch loose. You want to be careful, you'll get to a point, obviously as this hole's on a angle, you'll get to a point when you're no longer hitting the pin but hitting the inside of the cocking arm. So when they get a little flush like that, that's when I stop hitting them with a punch and I start pulling them out with some mole grips or nice pliers. Right, so I've got my set of mole grips here. I'm just going to clamp nice and high on the pin, making sure I'm not going to touch the body at all. Then I'm just going to wiggle the pen backwards and forwards, twisting it and pulling it. As we can see there, the pin started coming. Want to keep hold of the cocking arm as it can come loose, like that. Now that that pin's out, we can pull the hammer and the cocking arm out the back. Okay, with this pin removed, we can now remove the cocking arm, pellet probe and the hammer spring assembly. So all we need to do, being careful of course not to lose anything, is pull the entire assembly at the back, out the back. There is this little cast piece here, so be careful you don't lose that, and there's also a spring attached. So be careful. Near it all comes there. So I'll stick the block to one side. So this is the hammer spring and the rear hammer spring shuttle. I'm going to be replacing this for an adjustable one, so I'll show you how to get this off, but it's quite a nice little unit. Next we have the open assist spring. This is the spring that when you pull the cocking arm open, it sort of automatically comes 90% of the way, then the last little bit is just cocking the hammer. So this is the spring that makes that work. And then finally we have the pellet probe and cocking arm assembly. That little nub there is what attaches to the spring. There is an O-ring on the face here, and that's just a bumper as you push the pellet probe back forward. Stop it rattling as you fire the gun. Okay then, this is me taking off the anti-tamper for the hammer spring adjuster. Now to be clear, you only need to do this if you're planning on fitting an adjustable hammer spring. HW100 sells one and that's the one I'm going to be fitting. So to start with, we're heating it up and we're going to take out the small grub screw in the back of the hammer spring adjuster. This is just a locking screw and we need to remove that first. Then we're just going to heat the body really hot, break all the bond from the Loctite and expand the outer collar. What this will do is allow us then to just jam a big flat-headed screwdriver in the back and twist it out. Now to get it out you have to turn the screw clockwise. So do it in and it will wind the shuttle out. Once we've taken the outer shuttle out we can just cut the threaded portion off with a Dremel. I used a nice cut-off wheel and the mole grips that you see there are just to stop the piece from spinning. Once we cut it through 90% of the way I just get a flat-bladed screwdriver in there and break it off. The final operation was then to cut off that little bulbous piece at the end of the rod. This is holding the hammer spring captive and we need to remove it to get the hammer spring off. Now HW100 has a video on this. What he does is heat the hammer up and actually unscrew the rod. Since I want to make a guide for it, I'm going to leave the rod on, leaving it as long as possible, and what I'll do is I'll turn the outer diameter down and press over a PTFE guide, but I'll show you that in the reassembly video. Here's the block back again, and there's a few more things I'm going to take off as I'm going to be making a small series of improvements to the rifle. Nothing major, and I'll tell you what I've done after I've done it. But first I'm going to remove this, and this is just a detent for the cocking arm to run on. So that's removed with 2mm Allen key, just in these two screws here. I like to put my finger over this piece here so it doesn't spring out. Be very careful as you take that off, as there is a very small spring in the base there. And the detent arm can be pulled out as well. So stick that lot to the side. Next thing I'm going to do is knock this pin out. What this will allow me to do is take this arm off and give the underside a good polish. This arm here is used for the indexing mechanism, and as we pull the bolt back, a piece of metal rides along here and lifts this arm up. So having a nice really smooth surface under there will be helpful in making a nice smooth rifle. So I'll knock this pin out quickly. So just quickly, this is how I knocked out the pin. It's not that tight in there, but I got my punch, went in from this side in the little hole, knocked it loose, and as soon as I got about 10mm in with the punch, the pin just became nice and loose. With this pin out, I can now pull it out from this side with my finger over the indexing arm, pull it out, then we can unhook this spring here from the indexing arm and pull the arm itself out. This is the surface I'm interested in, and to be honest, from the factory it looks pretty smooth. But I'll just get the Dremel on there, give it a buff up, nice polish, and we'll make sure that there's no problems when it goes back together. So stick that to one side. I'm going to leave the spring in the end there, and that's just held in with a grub screw, but I'm not going to take that out as I don't think it needs to. Last thing we're going to do with the block is take out the magazine indexer. Doesn't really need to come out, but I'm going to re-grease it so it's nice and smooth. So that's done by using a 2mm Allen key in this hole here. These are normally Loctited, so just be very careful as you undo it. You certainly don't want to strip the screw. And also be extremely careful as you take it out, as there are a couple ball bearings and a small spring in here. So there's the screw. There's one ball bearing. You can remove the arm. And there's the engaging arm there. Stick that to one side. And then there's still a ball bearing and a spring in there. There they come there. Once the little indexing button is removed, we can remove the entire indexing system as one lump, and there it is there. And that's about it for the block. Fully disassembled. We could go a little further if we wanted to. We could knock this out, but I see little reason to do so. Right then, next up is the trigger. Now, I'm not going to be taking the trigger apart in this video. This isn't my rifle, and I'm not comfortable with knocking out the pins and possibly losing something. But it does look like a fantastic trigger, so I'll get you lots of nice close-ups of it. So if you do decide to take yours apart and it does explode like triggers tend to do so, then you'll have a good idea how to put it back together. So this is this side, and all that happens as you pull the hammer back, what it does is it pushes down on this part here, locks these two sears against each other, then as we pull the trigger, this bottom sear lifts up, and as we pull past the second stage, it lets go. So the hammer hits this part, pulls this sear down, engages with the bottom sear, and that's our trigger sear there. So as we pull, it just knocks it loose and allows the rifle to fire. And again from this side. So we've got this spring here, and this holds the bottom sear against this middle sear. Just so as we pull this back, this bottom sear jumps under this middle sear. This is what also gives us our trigger weight, and I think this is adjustable by this screw here. As we adjust this in and out, it moves this arm here further away and closer, effectively increasing and decreasing the spring tension. We have our first and second stages there. I believe this one here is our first stage adjustment, and and this one at the back is our second stage. You can see the second stage screw there, and the first stage screw is hiding behind there. First stage is always engaged, and as we get back, the second stage screw engages and finishes the operation. There is a hair of creep on this trigger, a very, very small amount. It is a nice trigger, but there is a little movement in the second stage, so I'm going to adjust that out when we put it back together. There's a view from the bottom and the top. This spring here connects in a little hole in this middle sear there. You can just see the end poking through. Can't see it from that side, but there it is there. And then in here we have a number of bushes. Large one on this side, which is trigger facing forward. So large one on this side, small one on this side, and the arm goes through there and down the bottom there. So the safety on this trigger can't be engaged unless the rifle is cocked. So we'll cock it, we can put the safety in. All this does is lock the second sear down, so it doesn't matter how far we pull the trigger, it will never fire. There's a better look in the back there. As we push the safety forward, now the rifle is ready to fire. Pull the trigger. I will give these faces a quick polish up, and I'll be cleaning all the old grease out of it and putting some new stuff in. Right then, the last thing I'm going to do, as I forgot to do it earlier, is separate the two halves of the regulator. So we're going to put a 10mm spanner on the bottom and an 8mm spanner in the top, and just undo them very carefully, as there is a spring and a ball in here, so just be careful as you undo it. There's the ball bearing in the bottom there, and there's the spring in the front there. So we'll just tip the ball bearing out, and the seat for the ball bearing is inside there. There's the ball bearing that seals on it. Right then guys, that's going to about do it for part 1. That's the whole rifle disassembled. What I'm going to be doing now is making a series of very, very small improvements to a number of components throughout the rifle, and then putting it back together. So I'll show you what I do in the next one, but for now, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one.